Hi everyone, hello, good afternoon. Welcome back after your final break and welcome back to the final session of day one of the 2024 EV Summit. I'm Marc, I'm back from this morning, Head of Strategy and Insights at Auto Trader. I'm going to be with you for about an hour. And we've had, haven't we, tons of insights, loads of engagement. We've heard a lot about progress, we've heard a lot about challenges, and the good news is we're going to turn some ideas into generating revenue in our next panel, you'll be pleased to know. So I'm going to moderate the EVOLT charging panel after this. We're going to look at innovations in EV integration, fleet management, and revenue diversification. The rise of EVs is revolutionising transportation, pushing innovation in EV integration, fleet management, and, as I said, revenue diversification. And today, we're going to look to explore how these advancements can enable businesses to seize new opportunities and also drive sustainability. I'm going to invite our panelists on stage in just a moment, but first we're going to watch a short video from EVOLT before hearing from Lara Navetta, Sales Director of EVOLT Charging, who'll deliver the panel keynote. Thank you. Please welcome Lara to the stage. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the exciting discussion, Beyond Boundaries, Innovating EV Infrastructure, Fleet Management, and Revenue Diversification. My name is Lara Navetta, and I am the Sales Director at EVOLT Charging. At EVOLT Charging, we pride ourselves in our people and culture. Our combined management team holds decades of sector expertise from the early stages of sector development in 2013 to today's technical innovations, guidance, and regulations. While our market has matured, it continues to evolve from a disruptive stage of growth to an as-yet unknown consolidation phase. Just as in the early days, as one size did not fit all due to different vehicle types, payloads, journey distances, and charger types, the same principle applies today. If we look at how HGV and LCV market stands today, only approximately 8% of the buses in the UK have been electrified. Less than 1% of the vans and trucks have been electrified in the UK. Now, to meet government's target, we have a sizable task ahead of us, with several challenges. But as we know, along with challenges comes great opportunity. So what do we need to think about? Let's talk grid supply. If we reference back to the first pilot sites, which were rightly cherry-picked with good supply, frankly, it made the task a lot easier. Now we are met with the growing challenge to electrify the more complex ones for depot and public charging. If we do not have enough grid supply, what are our options? Whilst our panel will be able to explore this in more detail, a few areas to consider. Planning for future needs. At the planning stage, it is crucial to future-proof the work by considering future charging requirements and designing a well-thought-out electrical layout. This will help navigate challenges in the future and ensure your investment will serve you long-term, allowing expansion and the inevitable need to electrify, as the inevitable need to electrify your fleet grows. Shared infrastructure. Given the significant investment required of new supply, shared infrastructure with reciprocal fleet arrangements opens the opportunity to commercialize your chargers and create alternative revenue streams to offset this expense. This approach also creates shared assets with fleet optimizing charging assets across a 24-hour span, helping accelerate the overall market. supply chain planning. Our on-the-ground experience highlights the importance of understanding and planning supply chain requirements. This includes planning lead times, vehicle charging equipment, HV components to ensure that you meet your go-live dates. In closing, and before I hand over to our panel of experts, I want to emphasize that just like in the early stages of our sector development in 2013, most programs will have different needs. EVOLT Charging and our team of experts offer the expertise to navigate and support you through this journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lara. Really great for us to now think about the fleet sector. I mentioned earlier on this morning here in the UK, it's driving 3 in 4 electric car sales, and from there, of course, is going to encompass light commercial vehicles and then in time heavy goods vehicles. Clearly, this area is more complicated than the sort of the charge at home landscape that I'm more familiar with. So I'm very much looking forward to finding out more about it from the panel of experts. Please welcome them to the stage, and they will introduce themselves.
Look intelligent.
I think you look great.
Thank you.
Okay, hello everybody. We're not going to do big long introductions because we've got a ton of stuff to unpick. So I'm going to ask each of you to just give us a name, the business you work for, and then we'll get going if that's all right. Cool. So, who would you like to start?
Craig Halloran, Technical Director of Cleaner EV.
Hi, David Watts, electric vehicle consultant for MAN Trucks.
I'm Anne Buckingham. I'm the Managing Director of Swaco's EVOLT charging business.
Hi everyone, Michael Kent's Head of EV Solutions for GRIDBEYOND.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the stage. There's a load of complexity in some of the things there that we heard about from Lara. Some phrases that I hadn't heard before about reciprocal fleet arrangements and maybe some acronyms and so on that I'm not used to. So I'm going to begin with Anne now that she has the microphone. Just with a simple question. We're talking now about revenue diversification, and I'm assuming that means that there'll be some businesses that might be able to look for different ways and ideas to generate more money, and then we're going to talk through the panel about how that can be realised. But first of all, can you give us an idea of the kind of businesses that we're talking about? What kind of opportunities might there be for them? Are we talking about installing charge points and sharing them with third parties and making revenue from that? Are we talking about selling energy? What kind of thing is it and who might benefit?
Kind of each and all of those things, actually. So we work with public charging, so we work with charge point operators, some of whom we heard from earlier. But we also work with electrification of large fleets. And the profile is exactly as Lara was describing earlier. One size doesn't fit all. They're not the same. They're not the same in terms of their cash position. They're not the same in terms of their geography. They're not the same in terms of the type of fleets that they operate. So I think what we're looking to discuss a little bit more here is to help people understand the different revenue generation schemes that they can use to fund their charging infrastructure. And if they don't apply, and we'll talk a little bit more about each of those, what's the other option? You've got to electrify, the vehicles are coming, you've got to pay for the infrastructure, and it's not always cheap. So to talk a little bit about asset financing, to talk a little bit about sharing your depot that you've invested in with infrastructure so that you can, back to the reciprocal fleet agreement, if you're a bus operator that's out during the day, perhaps not the public, but it might be suitable and practical for you to share your infrastructure that you've invested in with the taxi fleet, for example. So that's one area. I think some of the colleagues that I have here have different insights, but another area is making sure that we value engineer the design of the infrastructure. So make sure that we load manage the infrastructure that you install into your depots to make sure that you're not overpaying and also to design in future resilience as your fleet changes and grows. And then finally, you mentioned a couple of points around public access. Now, that's tricky with fleet. But we've got some useful examples that perhaps we can talk about a little bit later around how some operators have made that happen. And then into the slightly mysterious world of our partner and colleague Michael, and the demand-side response piece. So how can you earn revenue by supporting the grid with sharing some of the capacity that charges your fleet out of time? So yeah, that's the context of the partners.
Okay,
here.
thank you. Everyone got that? So there's loads of opportunity if we just think a little bit differently. So there'll be people in the room at the moment who are probably thinking that sounds good. I could get involved in that. Help me understand how. The first question I'm going to ask of David actually, which is, can you tell us about the differences between workplace and depot charging?
Yeah, sure. So I work for MA Trucks right now, but I've spent 28 years in the car and van fleet world, and 18 of which have been focused on decarbonisation and electrification. So I've kind of got a bit of broad experience in this space. Our industry has a habit of generalising how we talk about things to try and make it simple. So we typically just talk about workplace charging. You know, if you ever read any article, it talks about workplace charging, and always we have then a one-size-fits-all piece of advice that comes out, which then makes it, because it's meant to make it simple, but of course that makes it confusing, because then you read another article that's also a one-size-fits-all that comes at it from a different angle, but still refers to the same thing. So the first piece is to, as a business, if you think about infrastructure, you need to separate out, you need to understand why you're putting infrastructure in the first place. And so you have workplace charging, you have depot-based charging, and it might be sort of semantics, but depot-based charging is primarily there to service a fleet. An operational fleet, probably vans, maybe trucks, maybe some cars, but it's probably a commercial vehicle fleet. Workplace charging is your employee car park. And the first mistake that most businesses have made over the last few years is that, you know, they've talked to me about this and they've gone, right, we put EVs in our company car policy, how many charge points do we need in our car park? And I go, well, none, because it has absolutely zero to do with your company car policy or your company car fleet. The primary which they go, well, that's a bit weird. What are we supposed to do? And I said, well, you need to understand why you're putting charge points in your workplace car park. For me, the primary reason for workplace charging is to enable all employees, irrespective of whether they have a company car benefit or not, or rather those employees who can't charge up at home, who are local commuters to the office, to enable them to charge up routinely, regularly, and reliably. It shouldn't be for the company car fleet. It shouldn't be for people who can charge up at home, have got a car that will do 300 miles, commute 30 miles, and then clog up a charge point. If you recognise that it's actually for people who can't charge up at home, and it's a key piece, we talked about the sort of, Vicky talked about this sort of, when we're talking about public infrastructure, and we sort of mentioned public home charging and workplace charging. Workplace charging is a core piece of the public charging jigsaw. There are 4 million workplace car parking spaces. You know, if 10% of those had charge points, that's a big thing. But this then, so if you then recognise that it's about people who can't charge up at home, or those people who are making journeys that are beyond the range of the car, then it starts to change how and why you're putting the charge points in and how you're going to approach it, and therefore, then you start to get into revenue piece, because you then start to go, well, how do we make sure that it's only for those people? Well, you don't make it free, for starters. You start to charge the electricity, and you then start to go down different roads.
Okay, 2 big different use cases. I'm going to come over to you, Michael, because I assume they have different load requirements. Is that right?
Yeah, so what we tend to look at within our business is we balance the national grid. So we help keep the grid balanced through different energy assets. So historically, that might have been, you know, within cold storage, steel, etc. But as let's use fleet operators as an example, as they're electrifying, what we can essentially do is use their load to help balance the national grid. So take a fleet depot, which is charging, you know, it might be charging from 5 p.m., 6 p.m. overnight. We can make that load available where they get paid. You know, well, we get paid, then we share the revenue back with the fleet owners or the meter owner, whoever that might be. So in our world, the revenue diversification comes from consumption. And what we're looking at with partners and so on and so forth is, okay, what does that operational profile look like? And how much flexibility is there within that operational profile? So essentially, the operational profile is charging. So how long does it take to charge the vehicle? What's the size of the chargers, and what movement have we got in that charging profile overnight? Then from there, we recommend a market that customer could go into, and there's different ways that we can manage that through for the customer. So with EVOLT, that's via software. So the last panel was talking a lot about software. We're in the same space. So in a nutshell, we're looking at it from a slightly different perspective, where it might be payments on one side for a certain scenario. Our side is, can we do anything with this energy load to help reduce total cost of ownership?
Okay, so exciting. We're in good shape here. We have got some good ideas on benefits and things like that. I'm sure it's not that easy, though. So I'm going to ask you now, how do you future-proof infrastructure projects, Craig, to make sure that they can deliver at the time and that they can remain relevant as technology evolves?
Yeah, you're probably right. We're the guys that put everything together, what everybody else is talking about, and trying to, like, it's dead easy, this guy, just put it on car park and we're away. But it's not, but the industry's moving on so fast. I mean, we actually went to a depot last week, which was installed 4 years ago. It's for 70 buses. It's now not fit for purpose. So they spent a lot of money on sort of an infrastructure back then, which is now being planned to be taken out in the next 6 months.
What does that, when you say not fit for purpose, what to describe what that means? If 70 buses sounds great, what's wrong with it?
Yeah, the charging infrastructure for a start, 44 kilowatt AC charger, can't communicate with the back offices, the software, trying to retrofit 44 kilowatt AC charge with DC chargers, it's nearly nothing possible, just with a switch gear behind it. We need more power on site. This one site had a 2.5 time connection. Now it needs 3.8 MVA to run the full site. And just about everything that they've put in is being taken out in 6 months' time. So it's trying to think about where the parking from day one, what does the client want today, what does they want in a year's time, where they're going to be in 10 years' time, and trying to put a roadmap there for each client or each depot over a period of time.
What sort of time frame, if people are interested in this sort of thing in the audience and thinking that sounds like I could do something like that, what kind of time frame do you advise them? How far ahead might they start need to be thinking and planning?
100% of the fleet, in my opinion. So if it's a bus depot, if they've got 170 buses there, for example, we do a lot of work with TfL, they will be going electric in the next 8 years. So we say, well, where are you going to be now? Where are you going to be in 8 years' time? And then we look at and we put a bit of a roadmap there from start to finish. And we have one site where it's 4 years before we're going to get a grid connection. So they know they can't tender for TfL electric routes for 4 years' time, but they're actually buying the energy now.
But at least they know at the time this is how long it's going to take, and you can start to plan that sort of thing. And right, great, thank you. Mike, I'm just going to come to you again because there are considerations that Craig's just talked about. What if there's a lack of available power? What alternative energy sources might people need to be thinking about? Or examples like that, for example, I've got four years away. Is there anything else I can do?
Yeah, so obviously you've got renewables such as solar, but a lot of customers we come across in our world have considered battery storage as a way of storing power to then use across different applications. So that could be a public charging site where it's busy, but they can't get more power, but they want to add more chargers in, or a fleet depot site. What we do come across in this market is the objections to maybe purchasing a battery from the fleet operator. So what we do as a business there is we can actually utilise that battery within grid balancing, so keeping the lights on for the grid, using it as an asset in that space, but also trading some of that energy in the wholesale market. So what we're about is looking a bit like what Craig was saying about future-proofing. We will come in early on in the stage and say, okay, what power could they get right now? What's the tipping point, or can they not get any? And then we might help model the size of the battery, then look at the profile of that particular site and what it expects to do, and then we'll give a forecast and analysis using what trading we can do with that asset to help offset the return, essentially, because it's very likely in some of the cases the battery won't be doing anything. It will be sat there. So there's ability to use it in two ways. A, to get what you need, whether that be, as I said, public, fleet, etc., and the other way is for helping balance the grid and, accelerating the return on the asset in the short to medium term.
Thank you. David, question for you. that there's quite a lot of stuff to piece together here for businesses, and there need to be kind of a, how do I do it? Is it worth it? What's the sort of cost-benefit kind of equation? In your sort of consultants' minds, what are the wider benefits that businesses might want to consider outside of installing this for their direct fleet?
Well, I mean, I guess commercial vehicles, in terms of electrifying them, is expensive. And when we're talking about trucks, just to give you a sense of batteries, we're potentially talking 10 times the amount of power per vehicle than a typical car. So multiple trucks on one site is a lot of power, and the more power, the more expensive it gets. So for me, it's not necessarily about the benefits, it's about actually working together with other operators, because most trucks, to some extent, are going from one site to another site, and there's a degree of shared ownership or shared access to those sites. So in order to make this work, we've got to work together, or operators have got to work together in order to share the facilities, which makes it more accessible then, because if you know that your truck can get a top-up charge of some degree at the location that they're going to, because they're delivering to a location, then suddenly it means you can service that contract, because truck operations are about servicing contracts, and increasingly we're seeing contracts require you to provide a greener service or an electric service. So some of the value is actually where you won't get that contract because you haven't got this service, but you may not be able to do this service because you can't, because it's beyond the range of the truck and the infrastructure isn't there yet in terms of the public infrastructure. So it's about actually working with your customers and suppliers together to go, actually, we all want the same end goal. How can we do this together to share our infrastructure? It's not for free. You're paying for the service. You're paying for the privilege. But doing it together means that everyone can actually hopefully get to that end point.
It's been a big theme, actually, through the rest of the day, hasn't it? Collaboration and working together in partnership to drive things forward. So I'm glad you mentioned that. But I'm also glad you mentioned the fact that this isn't for free, because I wanted to come to Anne next. For businesses that don't have the cash, I suppose, to pick this sort of thing up and take care of it themselves, how do they do that? What options are there?
And that's something we've focused on quite a lot, because the short answer is asset financing. And funding in this sector, we're attracting still a lot of interest, and a lot of asset financing companies are interested. I think for me and for EVOLT charging, we too are happy to provide an asset funding or an asset financing option. We're also happy to provide a part-funded option, but it's not the primary focus of what we do. And so I think for us, the purpose of these discussions, and back to the collaborations, we don't want anybody to overpay for their infrastructure. And there's always a cost of financing. So, and that's why we're having the discussion around revenue you can get from grid services, value engineering savings you can make with delayed connections that will come into play later, so that you can phase and plan when you have to make your cash investment into this. And load management, which is something that we've not really touched on, but from a technology perspective, we'll look to put dynamic load management functionality into a site to make best use of what's there. So I think the message from us is, yes, we can, and multiple other trusted parties around this room can provide financing and funded solutions, but it shouldn't be the only option. And I think that has come to fleet in the same way that it came with some of the CPO investment in the early days of this sector, which is if you don't have the cash to invest in charging infrastructure on your site, and you want to have a base level of reliable income, that's where the partnerships with CPOs are really important. But if you do have the cash, there's a way to attract upside. And it's exactly the same principle when you're looking further down into fleet electrification. If you don't have the cash, come to people that can help you with that, but there'll be a cost of it, and the upside, or in this case, the savings, will be less. And that comes back to Lara's introduction. You know, one size doesn't fit all.
Perfect. Thank you. So, I did have another question, but we'll see whether there are any questions from anyone in the audience. If you have got a question, someone's got a question, please raise your hand and let us know your name, although I think we know Sarah, and ask away.
I really shot my hand up quick there. Oh, my microphone doesn't work. Sad. Is it working? Yeah. What's the appetite like out there for shared infrastructure behind the fence, as I call it? So out of hours, specific times of day for anybody local.
Happy. David, Chad.
So it's very business specific, I think, in terms of what the appetite is. So there are obviously many businesses where site security is a problem. And for them, if we're talking out of hours access, it's a real challenge. So if you're talking public access, I think it's a no-no. If it's shared access with a trusted partner, that's a different question entirely, because those are people already potentially visiting the site. So that's a different piece. If it's businesses whereby it's much more of an open site, then I think the appetite is there. They just haven't really thought about it yet in that sense. And I've got a good example of somebody I really hope does it properly. So a well-known wine retailer, I won't say who they are, but they have quite majestic looking places. They announced a few months ago that they're going to electrify their fleet. And their model is basically, I think it's 200 and something stores around the country. Each store has one small van. And they are located within essentially residential areas, largely. And I mean, I'm amazed they haven't electrified already, to be honest, because they have small vans going not very far, but that's a different question. But they're open sites. They're not secure car park spaces. And I don't know what their power capacities are for their sites. That may well be a challenge. But though that, as a very specific business entity, is perfect for shared access to charging. And if they have the power capability to put a mix of charging speeds in, you'll get additional business because you've got high power chargers in there. Somebody comes for half an hour. While I'm here, let's buy a bottle of wine. Coupled with, they are located within residential areas. I mean, it goes to the whole, it's close to home, therefore it's within 10, 15 minutes walk. I'm going to park there overnight, I can charge my car, and you've helped solve part of that problem of the public infrastructure piece. So I hope so much that they explore that. Whether they have the appetite for it or not, I have no idea, but maybe they're here and they really want to do it.
I'll just maybe add to that. I think absolutely for existing businesses and businesses that have got a traditional geographic base, they've got an established locations. I think for us, we're having lots of exciting conversations with investors into new developments, land developments. And I think, Sarah, they've got a huge amount of interest before they acquire or when they acquire those sites to set up reciprocal fleet charging or charging infrastructure, because that's going to increase the value of the sites that they then deploy out, either to tenants or for sale. So I think again, exactly as Lara said in her introduction, we kind of cherry pick the easy ones. So that one of my favourite majestic wine stores, absolutely. So some of them will have locations where it already works. Some of them will have allow the community in to use that charging. It will work. But I think added value for people that have a portfolio of land sites, I think those guys are already on it.
Thank you. Everyone wants to collaborate with the wine shop, don't they?
Sounds good. I'm already on it.
One more question. You were next. I'm afraid. Is it a quick one? We've got 49 seconds. Go on. You can do it.
Grid connections as assets. GRIDBEYOND knows what I'm talking about. EV charging, DC charging hubs take a lot of power. 10 megawatt grid connections. Co-locating gas peakers, co-locating batteries, co-locating wind turbines. Hopefully now the government's changed the policy. I think it's going to take a broader response, broader approach to power to make EV DC fast charging that ultimate scale. Because if you just do DC fast charging, you just got one revenue stream and you're wholly dependent. And if I was an investor, I'd be...
Sounds like Michael, maybe Craig as well.
The answer is...
Crack on, it's all right, don't worry, we like this one.
Okay, the answer is definitely we're starting to see that emerge, particularly in, and it's very strange, it's in markets where there's a lack of grid connection. you know, so different, different assets being housed alongside other assets. So yeah, in short answer, can definitely see, or a lot, sorry, I'll rephrase it, some of the more advanced customers in this space, even some of the fleet operators are starting to think about owning their own renewable assets, you know, enhancing their energy side of the business. Power is a big part of the ecosystem, and energy will be. And I think where I sit, or what I've seen is, particularly when you look at the use cases we've just mentioned, they'll be thinking initially grid connection. How do I bloody get the chargers in the ground? Who does, so where do they get dug? What's the right charger? But then I think, you know, we're starting to see a lot more emerge in our world in that, okay, we might reach a problem, or we want to start looking at more diversification. Whether that's a power problem or a revenue problem, they probably go hand in hand in some cases. So just to...
I'll just finish up on that because it's going to take time. I personally think we're right at the beginning of a massive green industrial revolution. I think it's massive that's coming. It could take 10, 20, 40 years, who knows, but it's coming. But it's going to take years before we're actually there. But it's in the roadmap, as I keep saying.
Brilliant, thank you. I've learned a ton. I don't know about you. In the last 25 minutes, this feels like this could be a new era for lots and lots of businesses. Diversification, making money outside their core, and working with people like you guys who are at the vanguard of that. I think has been really, really useful for me. So thank you very much to our panelists. Super insightful.